Hello and welcome to the MEDIAlliance Institute. I'm Ron Harris, and we're so glad that you are joining us. And I know we've got people from all over the world who will be a part of this. If you've been with us before, you know that this is a special platform. It's not Zoom, so we don't have everyone's picture on here, but there's a great opportunity for you to send questions and comments and also to let us know where you are. We love to know who's signing on. So please do that. Whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook Live, your comment will come directly to us, and we'll have the ability to put them on the screen along the way, particularly the questions a little bit later on. And we're just delighted to be able to offer these on a monthly basis at this point, to be able to give you information that we believe is a help to you in your ministry work wherever you are around the world. And we're delighted to have one of our great friends with us. John McKinnon is here, and John is with In Touch Ministries. He's a senior producer and has been with them for 20 years or more. And John has helped us with MEDIAlliance quite a number of years in India, Ukraine, Eastern Europe, I think Bulgaria, maybe even Romania. And it's just been a joy for he and one of his good buddies that works alongside him, Gary Longenecker, to help in these areas of television production as we've gone around the world with our conferences. So we'll take a bite of it here. And we've asked John to talk specifically about the area of telling stories with video. You know, the world, first of all, loves stories. That's one of the main ways that we communicate with people effectively. Jesus used stories, the parables that he told. He painted word pictures that we read about in his parables. And what a tremendous tool it is. Well, today it's the same. People who say they have short attention span will watch a story for 2 hours on television or at the theater. They'll get caught up in a 2-minute story that has great impact. And so it's the story that provides a platform for a great truth. And that's what we know that you have the ability to do. And we want to give you the help to be effective in doing that. Now, some of you may be doing radio, but you know, it's all a blend today. Many of you in radio or online, you're using these tools. Maybe this gives you another step that you can use along with your radio. On your websites, on your special YouTube channels, on Facebook Live, whatever platform you're using, WhatsApp, and some of the other new ones, what is it, Telegram that's coming along, to be able to use these maybe short form or longer form stories that will have impact and point people to Jesus and give you further opportunity to invest in their lives the truth of God's word. We're, as I said, delighted to have John McKinnon with us. And don't forget, send us some questions or your comments about what you're hearing. We want to know that, first of all, you're there, and we also want to tailor this so that you receive the information that will be a help to you. Yeah. So, John, I'm going to turn it over to you and say, first of all, thank you for joining us today and sharing some of the background that you've gained over these many years of doing just that, telling stories with video.
Ron, thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity. I absolutely love working with Ron. If y'all know Ron at all, you know how much of a blessing he is all the way around. And I got to be honest, every time I get to do one of these, and I do say get to, I learn more from y'all and from actually going back through this material again. It was funny. I started going back through this material just recently, and I'm like, oh yeah. And that's one thing I'd like to say to y'all is what we're talking about today is really more conceptual from the standpoint of how to tell a story. And we won't be getting into how to shoot it, how to edit it, none of those kinds of things. That's normally the 3-day class that we do with Ron when we've gone, or 2-day class and we've gone over places. And that's where my buddy Gary Longenecker comes in. He's a cinematographer and excellent in lighting and those kinds of things. So we won't get into that today. And I'll tell you this, when I first learned this material, I knew this. At least I felt like I knew it. I knew it. But what this did for me and has helped with our team here at In Touch is give us definitive things to be able to talk about. One of the things that I have learned over the years is having the same language is so important. So this helps at least give a baseline of how to talk, but it also, in my opinion, reminds us of what the real points are. I can't tell you how many times we get into a brainstorming session on, just say, a commercial or a story or something like that. And everybody wants to jump to, well, how are we going to shoot it? Or what's it going to look like? Or how are we going to do this and that and others? And we always have to find ourselves, and I'm just as bad as anybody else. I find myself going this path, and it's like, I don't even know what I'm saying yet. I don't even know what my story is. And that is the thing that I'm hoping that you can walk away with today is an outline on how to do this, whether this is radio, television, somewhat written story. It gives you a generic outline of, hey, what's a process I can walk through in order to know how to tell a story. So that's what I'm hoping to accomplish today. I hope that's my heart, that's my goal, and I really hope that this blesses you guys. So if real quick, if you see me looking this way or this way, it's because I've got actually two monitors going with the where the camera's at. That's so I can see comments and those kinds of things, and then that's so I can see my next slide so I don't get lost. So anyhow, here we go. All right, let's go with the first slide if we can. Can we go ahead and take that full screen? Great. So storytelling. A great story serves two masters, the storyteller and the listener. During a 5-minute story, the teller imparts something of meaning and the listener is both entertained and enlightened. And I think this is one important thing, particularly in the Christian realm, that we need to understand. If you look at this, it says that the listener is both entertained and enlightened. Entertained. We are not just trying to enlighten and bring things to people. We do want to entertain them. Whether you realize it or not, in today's world, your competition, particularly in today's world, your competition is not the ministry next to you. We're all trying to accomplish the same thing in ministry work. We got that. But your competition is the clips on YouTube, the clips on Facebook Live, the TikTok, ESPN, all of them. You've got to have some form of entertainment in this. Every documentary out there that has ever been created has some form of entertainment in it. So keep that in mind as we go through. You have to entertain and you have to enlighten. Next one is a quote from Robert McKee. The story is the most powerful way to present ideas to the world today. If you don't know who Robert McKee is, he's a storytelling author and instructor. He was a screenplay writer. I actually had the opportunity for the first time to take his class just recently, last year, and it's a very good class. It's more for writers, and I took it so that I could more understand and speak with writers in a better way. We have some writers on staff. I am not a writer. I'm more of a director and those kinds of things. So let's hop in. So what is a story? So the definition of a story, if you go to Webster's, is an account of incidents or events. It's a statement regarding the facts pertinent to the situation in question. So we can all do stories now, right? Just telling people a set of events of what happened is news more than anything else. And excuse me real quick, I got to turn that off because my phone's going crazy. So anyhow, so it's different than a set of events. If you're just giving a set of events, then that is news. But if you think about the comedian on the clip that we sent, did he just give you, okay, I went to the grocery store, I got my groceries, I got on the bus, or I got on the train, things fell out, I got in an argument with a woman, and then I went back? No, he elaborated on it, and he made it entertaining, and it had a point. So that's where we get to, is the stories about, what you're telling the story about should be different and better than what actually happened. So again, referring back to that video, if you've seen it, the man, do you really think it was that entertaining and that comical at the time that it happened? Probably not. Did he elaborate? Yes. Am I saying lie? No, I'm not saying lie. I'm not even saying necessarily embellish, but you have to find the points that are going to make it interesting. And this is the case with every life. And I will even go back, as Ron and I were just talking, when Jesus told stories, they were parables. Now, these weren't live stories, and that's what we're kind of focusing on in here. But they were stories, and these stories were most likely better and different than what he had, than what actually would have happened. So hopefully that's making a little bit of sense. Um, so the story should be about something beyond the obvious events of the story. And that's kind of what I'm getting to. That's what these three things are leading up to. What is your story about? And the story is not about the events that took place. The story has got to have a theme. The theme is the thing that makes the story. The theme may not be obvious. I'm sorry, I don't mean that the way it sounded, but the theme is what makes the story interesting. The theme is the premise of the story. Go back to the comedian in the piece that I'm really hoping y'all saw. Um, the the theme of his story was not him getting groceries and having a bad day. That's not what the theme was. The theme of his piece was why he loves New York, why he loves living in the city, why humanity is actually good. That's honestly what the whole piece boiled down to. So you have got to find the theme of what your story is. You uncover what the theme. It actually uncovers what makes all of the events that you're trying to tell meaningful. Going from A, B, C, D, E, F isn't meaningful unless it has a reason beyond to it, and that is what your theme is. So hopefully that's making some sense to everybody. And usually when you're actually starting to tell a story and you're starting to work on a story, the theme is not seen right up front. The theme is usually seen hindsight. An example I'll give you on this is we were going to tell the story of a lady for In Touch. She had cancer, was healed from cancer through medical means, and she became a partner of In Touch when she was going through the cancer treatment. And we were just telling her story that how In Touch blessed her when she was going through the cancer treatment. During the interview, all of a sudden she said, but cancer wasn't my problem. The problem was that I didn't know Jesus. Our entire story changed at that instant. And that's what it boiled down to, was cancer's not the problem, not knowing Jesus is the problem. That was our theme for the whole piece at that point. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. So and you don't just go out and pick a theme, and you don't just sit there and go, okay, well, we're going to tell XYZ theme. You got to uncover it. And again, the example that I just used, in my opinion, is a really good example of sometimes you have to uncover that theme. In that instance, we thought we knew what the theme was and we're going one direction, and it totally changed. So the way that we actually normally figure out what the theme is pre-interviews. Is we will go in and do interviews ahead of time so that we can actually understand what our theme should be, and then we have a direction that we go to. But I will say this: always be ready to change that theme, because something may come up that you're not familiar with. So now you've got your theme. You know what the story is. You know what you want to be able to tell, and what you want the person to watch to walk away with. Again, if we go back to that first definition, it's entertain and enlighten. So what are you going to entertain them with, and how are you going to enlighten them? So now that's the theme. So now we know what that is. You've got to determine what the stakes are. The stakes is what makes the audience care about your story. The stakes, we sometimes call them tensions. Writers will call them tensions a lot of times. What's the tension of the story? But stakes are the elements that actually make you care about it. So a simple definition of stakes is something that you could win or lose as part of a game, a contest, or something along those lines. Some examples of stakes would be, well, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead, but you have to ask yourself, what is at risk in your story? So when you're telling a story, you've got to ask, what is at risk? That if there is no risk associated, you probably don't need to be telling the story. Telling a story of somebody that, well, I got saved when I was 2 and I've never had any problems. Everything's been great my entire life. I don't know about you, but I can't even relate to that. So find the tensions, find the areas that make your story interesting to people. Some examples of this is your father's love. What if you have somebody that they never felt like that they were loved by their father, but they found the love of Christ in their life, and Christ became their father? Maybe that's an idea. his wife's approval. Maybe you have a character and he doesn't feel like he ever gets approval from his wife, so he wants that. Or someone's pride. I lost everything in order to find Christ. Those kinds of things. I call this the heart of the story, is when I'm doing it. A lot of times, to me, these tensions and these stakes are these things that I can go, oh, I can relate to that, or oh, I can feel that, or oh, I can see that. Are you going to hit everybody in your audience? No, but you got to hit as much of them as you can. And if you think about any movie out there, anything along those lines, they call it character development when you're getting into movies or fiction. You have to develop those characters so you actually care about them. And when you're doing, I'll call them documentaries, but stories, you've got to figure out why your audience is going to care about this person you're talking about. It's more than just telling how they got saved. Why do I care about that person? And these stakes is what actually will make that happen for you. So stakes without essays are nothing more than news. As I said before, if you're just listing a series of events, if that's all you're doing, which is fine, I'm not criticizing it. It's a different animal. News, we're supposed to be unbiased. News, we're just supposed to be reporting. But if you're trying to actually move somebody or motivate somebody, you have stakes. Again, go back to Jesus and the prodigal son. What were the stakes involved in this? That quick story. Well, let's just hit the stakes on that real quick. You have the father who's being rejected by his son. That's a stake that people can tie to. You have I didn't die again, Ron, did I? I just
No,
okay. Good.
You're still there. And I was just going to mention that your slides, if you're wanting to show your slides, they haven't been sharing with us, so you may need to hit the share button.
Shoot, I am sorry, guys.
That's all right.
I'm failing all the way around today, aren't I?
Hey, this is this is live,
Yeah,
this is what happens.
Hang on, let's see if I can get this going. This one here. I'm sorry, guys. Please forgive me.
Not a problem.
Is that better? You see it now?
There we go. Yep, got them right there.
Okay,
super.
All
right, I'll back out.
What I can do after this, guys, too, is I will get Ron a PDF and he can get all this to you. So I apologize. I thought it was going. I got messed up. So please forgive me. Anyhow, go back to the prodigal son. What were the stakes? The father had rejection. That's one of the stakes. The son got all of his money and then took off and spent all of his money. Well, now all of a sudden the son has got failure and pride issues that he's dealing with, and possible no love. And then you have the second son who doesn't want to accept his brother coming back. I mean, there's tons of stakes within that one story, that one fairly short story that Christ told. And each one of those points is something people could relate to. So when you're trying to do a story on somebody, either in your church or from a partner for your ministry or something along those lines, you've got to find out what those pieces are that's actually going to make me care about them. So this is something, it seems very trivial, but this is something I ask all the time when we start reviewing stories. I'm like, where's the heart of this? Why do I care what this person's doing, saying, being? So in summary, you'll get the audience to feel interested and invested based upon the clarity of your theme and how well you draw them into the story with the stakes. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. You've got to your theme has got to be clear. And we're going to get to something in a second on how to make it clear, and what not to do on it. But it's got to be clear. They got to understand at the end of the story what you were trying to tell them. I cannot tell you how many times I've done a commercial or done a story and we pat ourselves on the back and say, oh, isn't that a good job? And then nobody gets the point at the end of it. And as far as I'm concerned, it's worthless at that point. We did not do our jobs. And again, you will draw them in based upon the stakes, something they can relate to. A well-told story is assembled with great care and purpose. I say this, and this is really important to me, because of the fact that it takes time. This is if you don't have time to put into it, it's not gonna it's not going to be there. So just know that. Okay. One of the big things that you have to do in this too is show people what you're trying to tell them. I can't stress that enough on this. And what I say is in order to tell them, you want to show them. Don't tell them. And a great example of this is let me say this is say if I came in and I was telling you guys, I have this when I was growing up, I had this really mean grandma. She sat there and she would yell at me, and she would just be mean to me. She wouldn't feed me. She was just mean. I couldn't stand her. If I tell you that, you can kind of draw your own conclusions and come go anywhere else. If I show you this, instantaneously that's not a nice person, and you can go with it. So that's what I'm saying is show, don't tell. We literally last week we were reviewing a story that we had, and what we do is we'll do pre-interviews on things, and then we'll write up a script and kind of go from there with it. In the script it had in it or in the interview that we did, the person said, it was really cold. We were homeless for 5 years. Me and my son had to live in a car, and it was really cold. Well, we had that verbiage in there. And I asked him, I said, why are we telling them this? Let's show it to them. In this situation, we're doing an animation on this for various reasons of the story. So it was like, well, let's just show them. There's no reason to tell them, show people. Again, remember, a picture's worth 1,000 words. If you're shooting 24 frames a second or 30 frames a second or 60 frames a second, how many words are you telling in that second? So keep that in mind. Other examples of giving examples. See what I mean? Angry wife. I could tell you my wife is angry, or I can show you some things. So when you're starting to move through this, let this. You had to set the scene. You got to let the moments unfold in real time. What I mean by this is try not to jump around too much. And I'm not saying that if you're telling a 2-year story, you got to do a 2-year story, but you have to kind of let the things unfold. Don't just summarize when you can actually tell. And this is all part of the things that actually makes the audience care about what's going on. So much of the time, particularly in the stories that we tell at In Touch, I'm not getting in on the fact that the person is getting saved at this point, or In Touch has had an impact at their life at this point. It's all in the past, right? And I would assume that's for most of y'all, that's what happens. You got to tell this story. Don't sit there and take the viewer of your story and say, okay, well, here I am now. Now I'm going to go back. If you can, pick it up in the back. I'm not saying reenactments, but what you want to do is you want to take your audience to the events happening, not looking at what happened in the past, but taking them to the now. Does that make any sense at all? I'm hoping this does. So what we try to do is when we're telling the backstory of somebody, we take them to that point. We don't start here and then move back. We take them to the point of, instead of saying, back before I knew Jesus, I had a drinking problem. We would start with, I've got a drinking problem, or I had a drinking problem, or something along those lines. And you move in that linear standpoint. I'm not saying totally, completely linear. You can jump around on stories depending upon what your story is. Just keep in mind, everything has to serve the story. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But take them to the now. Think about any story you've seen. 1917. Hopefully maybe some of y'all have seen that movie. I'm not going to give any spoilers away. They don't sit there and take you to this point and then go back. They drop you right in the middle of the film and you figure it out. And for the most part, with most stories, you can do that. Drop the person in to what's happening now. Again, go back to the comedian in the story, the example that we sent. He didn't sit there and say, I was blah, 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 and then go into it. He said, okay, so I'm getting on a train. I've got my groceries, blah, blah. He took you right to the meaning of the story, right as it was happening. Hopefully that's making some sense. If there's any questions about it, please follow up on it, because I want that to be clear. One of the things that you have to do with the story is you've got to make critical choices. into the story. This, I think, is probably one of the most difficult things to do, particularly when you're telling a faith story. You got to make decisions as to what you're going to leave out. You cannot tell everybody's story in a 3 to 5 minute piece or a 10-minute piece. If you go and look at some of the documentaries that I like to watch to learn more about how to tell these, ESPN has a show called 30 for 30s, and they've got another thing called E60. In my opinion, ESPN does a great job at telling story. They'll pick one specific theme, and then they'll go throughout the whole thing, and they actually do a good job of bringing the stakes in, but they make critical choices. They're not telling you every single piece of detail. You've got to be able to make the critical choices. So how do you do that effectively? You have to ask yourself some questions. Does it attach to the theme? What is the theme you're trying to get across of a story? We did a story 2 years ago now about a couple that he was a steel mill worker. She was I forget what she did. She was an office lady. He was gone all the time. She was home raising the kids. When he worked hard, and the way he said it, he played hard, drank a lot, did those kinds of things. When they came home, they would go out and get drunk all the time and party real hard. Well, one night, actually one morning, they woke up and turned on In Touch and was moved by what Dr. Stanley was saying. They didn't have any money left in their pocket, and he looked at her and says, "We got to go to church." They went to church. I think they said they had like $100 left, and they gave $60 of it to the offering, because what Dr. Stanley was talking about, that he was tithing, and it actually touched them. From that point on, In Touch became important in their lives. They got themselves connected back in the church. They come to know the Lord. They've gotten cleaned up. So our story was not about, or our story was about how they got cleaned up. One huge thing that we chose to leave out was that she had had several abortions previous life, and now she's actually working to counsel women against that. Great story, very important story. Not diminishing that at all, but for what we were telling and the theme that we were telling, it would have been something that actually distracted from what the main theme was. So hopefully that makes some sense. And that's what I was talking about. Does it distract from the story? What is the theme? What are you trying to accomplish? Keep that in mind as you move through. What are you trying to accomplish in this story? If it distracts, if it makes me go, "Hey, well, that's interesting, I wish I knew more about that," then you've lost it. Everything should serve the story. This is what I was saying before. And I'm going to take a quick sidebar here and say this. Everything in your story should serve the story. What I mean by that, the camera work, the editing, the audio design, if you're telling a story on radio, how the sound effects for the video too. Everything's got to serve the story, guys. This is not a hey, I got a cool shot. I want to put this cool shot in. Okay, well, why are you putting the cool shot in? Because I think it's cool. It doesn't work that way. It's going to distract from your story. It's going to pull away from it. If the camera shot makes sense for what the storyline is, great. If it doesn't, don't do it. There's too many times that we want to get, cutesy with either our editing or with everything else. Keep in mind, it's not about you. It's not about what you even like or want. Does that have an influence into it? Absolutely it does. God's given you the ability to be creative. Be creative. But how does it play back into your story? And how is the viewer going to absorb it? Again, I'm hoping some of that's making sense to folks. So, real important here, the traditional outline for speeches, and this has actually gotten into storytelling, is tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. An example of this, I was actually thinking about this. What can I give you an example of this? I've done this. Well, you start off a story and said, I was a real wreck before I knew Jesus, but then once I came to know Jesus, things got a lot better in my life. Then we go, so when I was 12 years old, I started to take drugs, blah, 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 blah. We move along. Jesus came into my life, and now everything's great. And ever since I know Jesus now, I have a better understanding. That's basically that outline, right? I told him what you're going to tell him by saying a easy little statement that just says, I was a train wreck until I got to know this. A lot of times I have seen folks want to use that as a hook to get you interested into moving forward on it. The hook at the beginning, if you feel like you need to do this, doesn't need to be the whole story. The hook needs to be something to pique my interest, if that's making sense. Then you tell them the whole story, then we come back and say, so see, now that I know Jesus, everything's great. Don't do that. Hopefully, I'm not going to have a spoiler alert here. Hopefully, everybody's seen some of the Marvel movies. Let's say Endgame, the last one that's gone on. If you haven't seen it, turn your speaker off. I don't want to take it away from you. But if we came out and said, "Hey, Thanos is going to die," he's not going to win, and then we go through it. Would y'all watch the movie? Would it have been as good? No, it would not have been. And what I'm going to say with this, even in that situation, with any of the movies that you have watched or seen or stories that you tell, you know the outcome to an extent. You know, for the most part, although in 2020 and 2021, it's let the bad guys win is kind of the mindset. But for the most part, most stories, we know they're going to turn out for the positive. We don't want to walk out of a story feeling depressed and negative. But you're staying into it because you want to see how it gets there. You want to see the path that it's going to be going in. So, but at the same time, you don't just tell everybody what happened. Again, if you've seen 1917 at all, you kind of know what's going to happen at the end of it. Well, how are we going to get there? What's going to happen? But they don't tell you that. So hopefully I'm not being confusing here and making some sense. So the traditional guidance spoils great stories. Don't spoil your plot. Just keep that in mind. Give it to them in the now. Move through the transition of your linear story of how you want to tell the story. Again, when I'm saying linear, I'm not saying necessarily A to B to C to D to E. I'm saying, how are you going to tell that story? If you got to jump around in it, you jump around in it. But what's the essence of telling the stories? Hopefully that makes sense. What you got to do is you got to construct a story arc on this. And how you construct that story arc is up to you. But the basics of a story arc, I would say everybody probably right now is going, I know this. But it's a good reminder on how to do it. You've got to launch the story with a preamble. You've got to be able to give something that's actually getting the story off the ground and moving. Again, the comedian on the piece for it. He just jumped right in. He just said, so I was getting on the train and I got a bag of groceries and I really need these groceries because I'm going through a surprise divorce. He's launched into the story. He started it in the now and he just started going, but he's actually starting to get your peak and get it interest and get going on it. Then you have to transform across the arc of the story. This is the meat of your story in here. These are your events, your stakes. Everything's got to be laid out within this transform across of it, okay? That's where your stakes and everything come in, and that's where I actually care about your story. Then you have to land the story, bring resolution to the theme. I don't think anybody likes more than anything of just hanging out there and not having a clue what happens at the end of it, particularly in our stories. Because of what we're trying to accomplish at In Touch, we feel like we've got to be able to land this and give it into something. So hopefully that's making some sense to folks. And actually, this is my last slide. I have just realized I flew through this, but there's always room for a story that can transport people to another place. Hopefully everybody, y'all have the ability to change lives, whether you realize it or not. God has given you creative skills. He's given you ability. He's given you knowledge, and you have that way, but we've got to do it through some of these basic storytelling principles. And I hope some of this makes sense. I got to admit, Ron, doing this on Zoom is a whole lot more difficult than doing it with the crowd.
I agree.
It's a whole
different format.
Yeah, it is. And
yeah.
I've actually gone through it a whole lot faster than I normally do, and I feel like I've left a lot out. So I apologize. But and also since I had that computer crash, so I know I kind of cruised through it pretty fast.
No problem, John. There's some great information there, and a reminder that that this information is available. And as John said earlier, he'll make the slides on a PDF available. And what you need to do, if you haven't registered, go ahead and do that. Whether it's right now or after we finish here, we'll be sure and send you the background information, the link to the video that he's referenced. And then if you watch this through again with your staff, then you'll have all these other elements there to help you with that. Bob Bartz is in Indonesia, is asking, what role does a character's thought process have in improving the theme of the story?
Bob, my personal opinion is this, I think it has a lot to do with it, to be completely honest. But as a storyteller, you don't want to sit there and explain that verbally, in my opinion. You're going to show it. It's back to the whole thing of show, don't tell. If you can show what their thought process is, if you can show it, then the person at home can connect with it. For the most part, particularly with storytelling, that's what people connect with is what are you showing me as part of the storytelling? Am I making any sense on that? I think the thought process is extremely important, but you got to be able to show it in some form or fashion. Don't just tell me, well, I was thinking that my wife was really mad at me, blah, 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 blah. You got to present it in a way that's actually entertaining.
John, I just read one of the old, an old book. It was 97. It's a fiction book. And I think every thought of every character that they ever thought was written in the book. On my iPad, it was 2,600 pages. Yeah. And I thought, and I just plowed through it. It was just weighting me down. There was a great story there, but I was caught up in all these. From the time somebody asks a question verbally, then you get the thoughts of this person, and it may take 7 pages for their thoughts, and then they answer no or something. Just
exactly.
So
here's one.
The producer has to synthesize.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And a lot of that, Bob, honestly, you can control in the interview. If you're going to be doing an interview, and again, let me be clear on that. Maybe you don't want to do an interview on stuff, then maybe you're doing a completely different story. But say you're doing an interview on it, and this actually will tie back into a question that I got asked before the meeting. Is do a pre-interview. You got to talk to these people before you go into it. That's where you can put them at ease. Tell them what you're going to be doing. I am a big proponent of not over-interviewing, though. And Ron, I'd love your input on this. I think you need to talk to them enough to know what the story is and try to determine what your themes are, what your stakes are, then how you're going to tell them. But don't over-interview them to the point that becomes so mundane that they're just repeating and regurgitating their story. We did an interview on a guy who it was a part-time missionary to China. Basically, he would go on short-term mission trips to China. He'd been doing this for years. He would take a little device that we have called the In Touch Messenger in with it. It's in Mandarin and Chinese. And he had told his story so many times. We literally did 3 interviews with the guy, and it was just so non-emotional and nothing. The third interview, we brought somebody in that he's never seen before. And I actually sat down with him and looked at him and said, his name's Tracy. I said, Tracy, this is not about you. Quit thinking this is about you. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, you keep telling this story like I care about you. I don't. God's using you. Stop getting in God's way. And that really affected him. And as storytellers and as people that we're trying to get, you got to sometimes think outside the box and be able to say, and figure out what the person is and hit them. In that third interview, he actually broke down and started crying in it. He got emotion, which of course, crying, woohoo, that's the best thing ever. So I think you got to find that balance there. But I think the thought process in it, you can help figure out ahead of time on your pre-interviews.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that. Somebody asked me the other day, how many interviews have you done in your radio and television career? And I think I've probably done 20,000 or more. And most of them were 4 or 5 minutes. Some of them were long form. Yeah. And you're exactly right. If you do too much of an interview, then the person you're talking to, now they're trying to say, what did I say earlier? Exactly. How did I say it? And it messes their mind up. So it's not spontaneous. It's not fresh sounding. And you do want to get enough of the background story, so you almost talk around it in that
Yeah.
pre-interview,
Yeah.
where you don't say, I don't want to hear the story, but what happened here? Don't tell me the whole thing, but what were your thoughts? What was the result? And you kind of get the basics of the story. But if you're going to interview them on camera, you don't want to go through it in the pre-interview. You
Yeah.
want that freshness to come out. And if it's, I had a lady one time say, well, Ron, I may break down crying. I said, I may break down crying listening to
Yeah.
you. So
Right.
don't worry about it. If it's a problem, we can edit. If it's not a problem, it will touch people's hearts. And that's what happened.
Absolutely. And I will say this is know where you want your interview to go. Don't be so married to your questions that you can't let the interview go somewhere else that you weren't planning on. I've seen interviewers before, and they have their list of this is what I want and this is what I'm going to get. Know what you want, and interviewing is a art form that you have to practice. You are not going to just jump in and do it. You've got to practice it, and you can lead them where you need them to go. One thing that I personally struggle with is we have some folks here that say, well, in the pre-interview, he said this, and I want him to say exactly this, so let me just get him to restate it. Depending on the story, it can work. Animation, no problem. We're actually making the whole story. On camera interview, my personal opinion, it never works because it sounds dry. It sounds prefabricated. It doesn't sound real. And I'm trying to get the heart. I'm always about the heart. So
yeah, that's a great point, because you really want the emotion to come through. You said it earlier. You talked about the tension points, things like that.
Yeah.
You're trying to grab people's emotions, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that's what happens with all of us when we come to Christ. It's usually because our heart is touched.
Yes.
And we are drawn into it. That's what you want to do with these stories. You're trying to make an eternal difference in someone's life with a life-changing story. There's got to be emotion. There's got to be heart, and it can't sound fabricated or rehearsed.
Absolutely.
In that regard. Very few people are good at rehearsing lines and saying them back.
Yeah.
Particularly the ones that you're going to be dealing with in telling these stories. But when they tell the story and you're a gifted storyteller, you can pull out of them the essence of the story, the power of the story, the emotion of the story, and then build the video to go around that to tell the story. Yeah. That's great. Some great stuff there.
Well, and one thing, and Ron, you sort of touched on this, is the people that you're talking to are not used to being on camera or having a microphone in front of them, or so as an interviewer, and we've had it before where somebody just shuts down and they'll just yes, no. When that happens, as an interviewer or as somebody on the crew, you have to do a couple things. You have to make them comfortable. You have to engage in conversation. Then you end up having a conversation and not an interview. And when I've had to do interviews, I'm not like Ron. I do them when I have to. When I do it, I enter into a conversation. It's not even an interview. Again, I know where I'm going. I know when to be quiet so that we can get good audio and we can get ins and outs and those kinds of things. That's in the back of my head. But I enter into a conversation with them, and you can put them at ease a whole lot faster. The other thing we do too is always tell them what you're going to be doing ahead of time. Don't just hit them. And most of the time, I will tell the people, look, this is going to be the strangest thing you've ever done in your life. We're going to ask you to do things over and over and over again. It's not going to make any sense. And one of the stories that we did, I talked about it before, the lady that had cancer and realized that cancer wasn't a problem that not having Christ was. We shot with her family. We did B-roll. We did all this stuff and staged it, and we left. And she told us the next day that we got done. It was a family dinner scene is what we were doing. We got done, and the father looked at everybody and went, he's dead quiet. And he just looked around and went, well, that was weird. And I said, that pretty much sums up what I do for a living. For everybody that's out, they're not used to it. You are. Keep that in mind. They're not used to it. So just keep in mind.
That's a great point. And somehow you do have to, we can't erase the cameras, the lights, the microphones from the scene as far as the interviewee. They're going to see them. It's going to be there, and it is. But you want them to appear as natural as possible. And a lot of times that may be just the pre-conversation, not the interview necessarily, just a conversation that puts them at ease a little bit and gets them laughing and taking a deep breath and not so uptight about things. And you have to sometimes you really have to entertain them a little bit to get them to loosen up,
Yeah.
to be able to tell their own story. And they want to tell it, but you're right. It's you put them in an unusual situation
Yeah.
for that. One of the other points that you made that resonates with me is that you watch good storytelling.
Oh, absolutely.
You watch other videos.
Absolutely. You've got to.
And it is an art, it's a craft. And if you watch people, it's not that you replicate what they do, you see the impact of what they're doing, and you say, I want to aim at that.
Absolutely. And I would venture to say everybody that's watching this right now, whether they're live or in the future, is all of us, at least I know on my team, all of us have a little bit of ego. Let's face facts. We want people to go, oh, wow, look at what they did. That's awesome. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think God puts that into us. I see just about everything, unfortunately, at least in what I do for a living, is some type of competition. So in Gary Longnecker, who normally teaches the class when we did the longer ones, is he handles the cinematography, the lighting, those kinds of things. But he and I have said this for years, and this is something that we've brought to In Touch when I came back to In Touch. My competition, as I said, is not you guys or a different ministry. Although I'm looking at you and I want to see what you're doing, and I want to beat you. I'm going to be honest. I want you to say, oh, wow, here's what's good. But it's ESPN, it's TikTok, it's all these other things that are looking for your attention. And we as Christians, if you go back, Christians used to lead the way in art forms. The Sistine Chapel, the Christians were the pinnacle of what art form was and good. What happened? Why did we fall back? We can sit there and say, well, I don't have the money that Hollywood does. I don't have this. I don't have that. Understand. But you do have abilities now to do more than we've ever been able to do. And know what good lighting is, figure out what good audio is, figure out how to tell those stories and those things, because it does matter. It used to be a lot of times we used to just say, oh, well, the content's good enough, I don't have to do a really good job on the visuals. That's not the case anymore. If you're not doing good jobs on the visuals, nobody cares. Pure and simple. That's where
you'll lose them.
We lose them so fast now. You have got to one of the statements that I said in this, it takes time to tell a good story. I mean, there's an old joke when I was in the secular world. Do you want it good, cheap, or fast? Pick two of them. If you want it cheap and good, it's not going to be fast. If you want it fast and good, it's not going to be cheap. So, and I think that is still very applicable. If you don't have the time to tell the story, and I'm not being critical. I know how this goes. There's sometimes stuff just drops in your lap and you have to go. I got that, but that should be the abnormal. That shouldn't be the norm. If that's the norm, figure out a way to change your process.
John, as we kind of wrap up here a little bit, could you maybe recap a process? You began talking about the pre-interview and all.
Mm-hmm.
Could you take 3 or 4 steps that would say, here's the pattern that you ought to be following if you're building a video story?
Yeah,
you touched on these points.
I think if you go back through, you got to develop whatever your theme is, and we typically will try to figure out what that theme is in pre-interviews and those kinds of things. In the initial time that you find out what the story even is, that's when we start determining what the theme is, and we'll do pre-interviews. We'll talk to them and our folks and see what they want. You also got to determine what the stakes are at that point, or tensions. Why do I even care to tell this story? So you have to determine those. All of that is before you shoot the first frame or record the first bit of audio. You have to figure all of that stuff out ahead of time to know where you're going. Then you'll move, and that's why I think this stuff that we say we know is so important to kind of keep getting over in your head, because if you don't know what your theme is and you're trying to make critical choices on what you're going to keep in or leave out, you can't go back to it. It's almost like a business, if you would. A business has a mission statement. I can almost guarantee you MEDIAlliance has a mission statement. Ron's not going to do anything outside of that mission statement. And In Touch, I can tell you all this. In Touch is the teaching ministry of Dr. Charles Stanley. That's who we are. Are we going to? So with that in mind, everything we do has to kind of line up with what our mission statement is, the teaching ministry of Dr. Charles Stanley. Are we going to go out and help refugee victims? Probably not. That's not in our mission statement. There's organizations out there that are going to do it a whole lot better than we are. Samaritan's Purse, pick them. They're going to do a better job than we are. Can we actually give materials to help those people? Absolutely. And we'll partner with other ministries to do that and do things. So all of that's to say is your story's the same way. If you don't know what your theme is, then you don't even know what to leave out. So you got to make critical choices on what you're going to leave out. And then you start your process from there. Does that help it all, Ron?
Yeah, it does. And so many times it's subtraction. It's
Absolutely.
not adding things. Somebody has a great story, but how do you get it down to the essence of whether it's 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever? You still can't tell everything. You mentioned that earlier. You can't tell everything. And so you have to subtract a lot of even good material to get down to that theme and where you're going with your story. And then after that comes the crafting of it in the editing suite, the visuals, the B-roll, all those other things that will enhance the story.
Let me take this real quick moment to say this too, is there's a saying that the story's told 3 times. It's told by the writer, it's told by the shooting, and it's told by the editing. And that third time, the editing, is the final time the story's told. So the one reason why I say that is when you're in the discovery phase and figuring out and writing phase, we'll call it, don't get so married in that you can't rewrite the story those other 2 times. You maybe missed something that's huge. I can't tell you how many times I've had a complete clear path for either a story or a commercial, and I get into the edit side of it, and the editor goes, "Hey, what about this?" And I'm like, "Oh gosh, he just made it
What a great idea!
What a great idea! Why did I not think of that?" Be open. One of the biggest things that we do, guys, is, and this is what I love about what I do for a living. Gary says this all the time. It's what we do is the most collaborative art form there is. You have to come to it with your hands open, not just to each other, but to God. God may, there's so many stories I could tell y'all on how God's gone, no, hey, use that. And it's just totally changes and fixes it. It is the most collaborative art form. Always keep your hands open on what you're doing.
Yeah, and God, He's the great creator.
Absolutely.
I mean, He's the one who puts any kind of creative thought in us through His Holy Spirit. And so we ought to be looking to and depending upon His input as we are seeking to serve Him with storytelling through all of that. Boy, some great material, John. I see Donnie DePries in South Africa has piped in and he's watching. And he says, thank you for your input and helping these. And I so appreciate you, John, not only going with us on the many trips, but now also touching lives literally around the world. The privilege we have at MEDIAlliance, our verse, which really is our theme, is to further the hope of life in Christ Jesus. And we do that with great people who are around the world using these powerful tools to tell God's story of hope and really love. The love that God has for us, but to a world that desperately is looking for both of those. And so it's a great opportunity to do that. So once again, thanks.
Sure. Yeah. Say one thing, Ron, before we go is In Touch, we're very blessed. We've got a lot of cool equipment. We got a lot of cool lights. We got a lot of cool stuff. At the end of the day, guys, it doesn't matter. It's really important for me to get across to y'all is God has given you an ability in your brain and in your eyes and in your ears. Maybe you don't have everything Hollywood's got. Don't make excuses for telling bad stories. It's a very, very simple thing to do. I hear it all the time here in the States with churches. Well, we don't have the money. We don't have the money. Okay, fine. What do you have and how can you tell it? Take the time to tell better stories, man. You guys, you can do it. Y'all can tell so much better stories than what Hollywood's telling. The garbage they're putting out right now, we can do a better job. That's all I'm saying. When
I talk about excellence, which is what we're talking about here, I often quote the former president of IBM who said, "You can do excellent work starting right now, as of today." He said, "As of this moment, stop doing less than excellent work." It's a mindset where you say, "This is," and particularly in our roles, John,
Yep.
this is for God's purpose.
Absolutely.
This is hopefully for Him to use to change people's lives. Why would I do less than my best?
Absolutely.
Why would I do less than my best? And it doesn't matter if you're shooting it on an iPhone with natural light.
Yep.
You want the best you can do or the best equipment you've got, but don't let that deter you from telling the story, because we want it to look good because people know what good is, but we also want to be sure that it's not just pretty pictures without a story. And that's what John's been talking about.
Don't make excuses.
Nope.
If you're making excuses, then maybe you don't need to be doing this. Find the better way to do it. I mean, it just
exactly, because it's hard work, by the way.
Oh, it is. It's extremely hard work, but it's a lot of fun.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun, and it's very, very, very rewarding.
It's a both and. Well, John, thank you so much. What a blessing it is always just to spend some time with you and to hear your wisdom and insight and what God has given you through the years and the opportunities and the way that you've helped us. That really is important. And as we mentioned before, this will, maybe a little bit of editing, we'll put this back up.
Sorry.
No. We'll put this back up on our YouTube channel. And you'll find it there, and we'll have some information. If you have some other questions, send those to us. We will share those. It's something John can help with.
Absolutely.
We will do that, and we'll connect with him and get some information to you. But most of all, I would say watch this, look through some of the material, watch really good interviews. When you were out, John, I mentioned Steve Hartman with CBS, who tells in about 2.5 minutes poignant stories, touching stories, often faith stories, and he does it in an engaging way. He puts himself into the story a little bit more than you would normally do. But other than that, watch people who are doing good things, or the ones on ESPN that are doing some really good stories. Watch those things and learn from them. Be a lifelong learner. You may think you're pretty good at storytelling. Great. Why don't you be excellent by seeing what others are doing and learn from them? It's a great way to do it.
And look at the stories that you like and figure out why you like them. That's something all of it, because again, maybe you don't like the ESPN stories. Great. What do you like and what touches you? And then dissect it. Don't just go at the end of the day, go, oh, that's really good. I wish I could do that. Dissect why you like it.
John, is there a place that people can go and look at some of the things In Touch has put together? Do you have an archive area?
Yes, sir. If you go to intouch.org, actually, let me do it myself, and I'll post it in the comment section. But intouch.org, and if you look right under the watch, I believe it's right at the very beginning. We just have reworked the page a little bit, so I'm trying to, if you go right to watch, and then at the very top, there's a header. There's sermon notes, This Week on TV, and then faith stories. If you go to faith stories. Yeah,
great.
This is some of the ones that we've done. You can see we've got, I saw somebody say from Nigeria. We got close to your home from Kenya. We've actually done a fair amount of work in Kenya. But we've got a couple stories in there. We've got a couple animations in there. Several stories from the U.S. Take a look at those. Would love any feedback, comments, whatever on them. We're always looking to do things better ourselves. So if there's something you think we could have done, let me know. That'd be great.
Great. Thank you, John. John McKinnon, our guest today on MEDIAlliance Institute, and a great friend. And we'll get you on another one of these trips. We're working on that.
Okay.
We're working on that.
Well, let's do another one of these first now, because I got to get more comfortable and slow down a little bit. And hopefully my computer.
You can watch this back and critique yourself.
I'm not going to do that. That's awful.
Too brutal. Too brutal. All right. So next month, we're going to talk about writing, and it's going to fit in, I think, with some of the things John has said, but also writing for radio and television. Now, some of it may be more rudimentary writing opens and closes for radio programs or television programs. But how do you do that? There's an art form to that, and there's some things you need to learn from that. And we're talking to Roger Kemp, who's with RK Media. Roger is a great friend, known him for many, many years, and is an excellent writer as well. And he's excited to be able to present some material on kind of a writing 101 as it relates to radio and television, particular programming. And so we hope that you'll join us for that. You'll be a part of that event. That's going to come up on March 9th at the same time period. And we will send out information on that. Share this with other people as you see these pop up. Feel free to share them with others in Christian media who would benefit from that. We're not trying to hold it to our small group. We want the information to go to all who are serving the Lord and who are telling of his love, his grace, his truth, his mercy, and the hope that we have in Christ. So thanks for joining us for the Media Alliance Institute. We look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.